Go. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Spinner Rack. I'm here with my boy, Cal. Say what's up, Cal.
Hey, what's going on? Ready to rock.
Today, we are talking about the #1 show on Netflix right now, Jupiter's Legacy. Oh, man, this is a new production from Mark Millar's world. They're in collaboration with Netflix right now. And, of course, Mark Millar, he's doing his own stuff. He's coming out, he's from Kick-Ass fame. So he's coming out here. He's coming out with his own superheroes. And this is his take on, what happens to in essence, let's call it the Justice League after they've aged up and their kids are getting up there, the second generation, stuff like that. So, I mean, here, of course, this is the nuclear family itself. This is the man himself. They're part of this group called the Union. We have the son, Paragon. We have the sister, the mother, Lady Liberty up there. We have the daughter, Chloe, and we have the man himself. Okay, so what we're looking at here is, it seems there's a lot of shows like this that are coming out. These post, I don't know, it's a new world, basically. You have The Boys, you have The Invincible, and now you have Jupiter's Legacy. So I'm gonna kick it over to my boy, Cal. Hey, what do you think overall, first, of the premise, and then we'll go into the show, the whole premise of how these shows are coming up, where they're not playing the simple superhero game and things are just very, very different. So what's your take on the whole premise?
We haven't played the simple superhero stuff yet. I mean, most of the stuff that we've seen cinematically, even on, television, if you will, hasn't been superhero stuff. They threw a whole bunch of other, things in there. So we haven't really gotten classic superhero stuff. But these are stories that were might have been more cutting edge around the time that Alan Moore did them, like 2 or 3 decades ago with Watchmen. But it's in the same vein as that type of story, and they just keep proliferating it. It's not really, it's not new. It's just one maybe more extreme than the other. It's definitely deconstructionist in terms of, term superhero, and then they want to explore it somewhat. But this one just comes across as, there were some things here that I did enjoy, but it just comes across as very, very phlegmatic overall. They didn't have anything to say, which is a shame because the production qualities were good. It's obviously they put some money into this, but between the ending and no theme, no real focus as to what was supposed to be espoused in this show, utterly, on a large point, it was just very disappointing.
Overall, just getting back to these, I guess, the post-superhero world, or someone was saying the post-9/11 world, where people think that you have to be more definitive. The superheroes have to take lives. I think that is the general theme. Should a superhero kill? Especially in if it's the right thing to do. And I think the hero of our show does a pretty good job of explaining, you have a code. He's a bit rigid on that code, but he has a code, and the code has to be held no matter what. The utopian.
How can you call him? It's a code. How are you rigid on a code? If it's flexible, then it's not a code.
Well, there's flexibility in some codes. Here
name one.
I'm saying, for example, you can't right now. You can't kill. People will say you can't. Exactly, here you can't kill, but you can kill in self-defense naturally. My code is not.
That's not a code.
Then what is it then?
If you're saying you can kill in self-defense, what's the code? If it says you can't kill, you can't kill. If you're saying, well, you can kill in these circumstances, it's not a code.
I'm saying if you're defending yourself, you should be, your code, I know I do not go out, I do not kill people, I do not want to kill anyone, but someone is trying to kill me, and the only way to protect myself, to stop myself, yes, I killed, unfortunately.
The idea of this code goes all the way back to about 1943 with Superman, when mothers finally started reading these comics and they realized, oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of wild stuff going on. People getting killed, this, right, and the other. And DC, at the time, they had something called Superman Incorporated. And so they said, okay, we're going to cut this out. It might even be earlier than that, like maybe 41. But they said, we're going to cut this out. It's not going to be killing. because you would read something like a, Batman book. Batman would just flip somebody off, off a skyscraper. That was the end of it. Nobody knew if he died or, Superman threw some guy into the bay. Nobody knew what happened to this dude, and nobody cared because, it was the bad guy. The idea was just to get rid of them. But then it was very much entrenched that superheroes do not kill. Okay, they didn't kill in self-defense. They didn't kill for any reason. They did not kill. And that was something that was a code that was adhered to Until, of course, you get to, more modern times, if you will. And then the question became asked, well, what if it's this situation? What if it's that situation? But this is fiction. Okay, in fiction, you don't have to kill unless you want to. So the idea of examining, well, let's examine this. If it's a code, okay, and if it's a code and you have a back door out of it, then it's not a code. There's no reason for it. If you're going to say, well, look, I can kill in self-defense. If you're a superhero, you're going to be in self-defense a lot of the time. So you don't need the code.
No, in terms of the fact of the matter is, if you say they can you can't do certain things, no matter what, in defense of anything, basically, and if there's an option is given to a superhero who says, hey, this is something that has to happen. I mean, if you don't do this, you're going to you can't save anyone. You know, and of course, in the comic, you can always write it whatever you want, and of course, the show is fiction. Naturally, there's always there's some show I saw. I think it was I forget the name. There's always 100 ways or 1,000 ways to do something, but sometimes you get put into a box that there's nothing else for you to do. It's not ideal. You want to
There's
live
no
by a code
box.
and stuff like that.
There's
But
no box in a fictional world.
but we're back to this show though. It's I think it wasn't. I think there definitely be some people who've been panning it, but I thought the show was pretty interesting. It's a slow burn naturally, because they're trying to develop a world that they're in. But I think the issue is, and I think this is where it goes with all of these new shows, that they're trying to say, hey, what is the limits of from a superhero? At what point do you say, like, you have these bad guys who keep going in and out of jail back and forth, where you're like, you know what, it's not redeemable. Joker is no longer redeemable. We just have to stop it. So, for example, here, and I think that it covers it. It's a serious understanding of what's going on. I personally liked it. The production values is, I mean, wow. You have going back and forth, which is, I also have a criticism of that. We'll talk about that later in time. But I mean, you can see that the money that they put into trying to make this thing look good, look real, trying to get the characters, be their own, stand up on their own. Um, it's just like, wow. Of course, it also feels like it's the Justice League. All these shows feel at one point or another like they
It
are
is.
Justice
It
League.
is the Justice League.
It's like a Justice League.
These are DC. These are analogs of the DC characters. These are, without a doubt, this is the Justice League. These are this is the pantheon. These are the Olympians. These are the gods, without a doubt. But it has no theme. If you're going to come and say, well, we want to question the fact of whether or not superheroes should kill, and you consistently put them in situations where it seems like they don't have a choice but to do that. One, the superheroes look incompetent because every time they go in, one of these guys is dying. So I'm like, why are you putting these guys out there? They obviously can't handle these situations. You have this person, she seems new, she goes to handle the situation, she ends up dead. So, it's obviously these people, I mean, it's almost like real life situations. These people don't have enough training, okay? They don't have enough backup, whatever it may be, and they're ending up dying. But then you look like a bunch of idiots. You're gonna let your own people die? No. If it means that you can save this person, okay, then you got to kill this other guy. But you're setting it up for that. And then it makes whatever code that you're presenting in this look ridiculous. And this guy looks like a fool if you're going to keep putting up situation after situation after situation where they can't handle it any other way. They're not trying to punch somebody into space and saying, let's just let him cool out over there until he passes out, and then we'll go lock him. Power him physically. We can't seem to do anything but kill him. It's horrible writing. And if you're supposed to be examining this, you have to examine it. You're just coming to a conclusion already that this is what it needs to do. That is very lacking overall in the series. And then we just have these same stock characters in terms of an analyzed superhero character, if you will. You have the guy who's a classic Superman type, where I've got this morality, and I'm not budging from it, even though I look like an idiot for not budging from it. Then of course you got the kids, and the kids, oh, I don't believe in this nonsense, and they're going wild, and they don't know how to do anything. You got the kids who for some reason are raised by these superheroes who are supposed to be these classic versions of people, and when it comes to morality, and the kids are all lost. They don't know what the heck to do. The parenting was horrible. So it's just so much stock characters at the end of the day. And we've seen it all before. What I haven't seen is a situation where these guys actually raise a kid correctly, where the code actually makes sense, where we go in here and there's not one of the heroes that's a villain or looking to become a villain. So it's a lot of stuff we've seen already. Maybe if this had been done and gotten out before some of the other things that we've seen released, before The Boys, before Invincible, before all of that other stuff, or around 2014 or 15 when it was done, it might come across, you know, more a fresher idea, even though it would still have been something hackneyed at the point. But you know, you look at it now and you're like, what's the point of this? And the ending was horrible. You know, to end on a cliffhanger, it wasn't even a cliffhanger. You know, the last episode was the shortest episode of all of them. And you had all of these things that are still working through and nothing was resolved by the time you get to the 8th episode. It was just utterly disappointing.
Oh, you had a lot there to pack in. So, you know, I kind of disagree. I think like some of the characters, particularly like Hutch, was a pretty good character. It was very well drawn out. You also have some of the superheroes in the show, the second generation, you would say, who are trying to follow the code, who are trying to do the right thing. Of course, the main protagonists in the shows or the main characters are not. You know, and you're seeing how these kids handling fame and fortune. You know, basically, how do the kids of famous people handle these type of things going forward? Yes, in an idealized world, it would be, oh, they're all perfect and they come out doing well. But they don't, you know. We know for a fact many of these people, you know, they do things that are not necessarily what their parents would necessarily be doing. And I think they're just trying to put a little realism, of course, in this realistic, I guess not realism, yeah, realism. They're trying to inject a little realism to what these characters do, you know. That's how come these shows are now what? MA, you know, rated R. They're not basically PG anymore because they're trying to tackle, because what happened? We, the audience who grew up with this, you know, wanted to get a more serious take on some of these things. You know, it's a question of whether or not, you know, they're able to explain it as well as they possibly can. And in this show, I think it's because it's going to be, we know there's going to be multi-years. There's going to be another season, probably another 2 or 3 seasons on Netflix with this. They're trying to give it some space, some air to try to develop. And that's why the ending, you know, the ending came out the way it did. I kind of agree, it could have been stronger, but I think they're just trying to build something going forward. In terms of this versus other programs and stuff like that, could this have come out earlier? Yeah, I mean, like you said, Alan Moore, The Watchmen, you know, he started down this road, and I think there were other comics that were probably touched on it. But you see, this is the world after Batman that's happened, after The Dark Knight Returns, after The Watchmen, where people want this type of stuff or want to look into it. I don't know if this is necessarily this is not the stuff that's going to grab little kids or into the comic book hero world. This is the stuff that's going to
incredibly condescending. That's incredibly condescending.
Hey,
I think that the only people who would want, you know, classic superhero storytelling, or to want to see aspirational characters, would have to be little kids. That adults can only look at this fractured and flawed nonsense. That's incredibly condescending. I apologize to anyone out there, okay, who is an adult and actually, you know, aspires to be a better person, believes that we can have better values in this type of stuff, okay? And to you little kids as well, all right? Don't do that again.
Hey, I said I misspoke and you continued. But listen, I didn't hear you. Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, everybody wants to see a more aspirational story, and I do. And we've done reviews of stories that we've liked that are more aspirational, that are geared more to a general audience. But this is a different take. This is not everybody's into The Watchmen. Not everybody's into The Dark Knight. Not everybody's going to be into these shows. But there are more adult themes and takes on what's going on. You know, and
what was the adult theme in this? What's the adult theme? Because I've heard you say this is, you know, it's not an idealized world, but it is an idealized world. Idealized world doesn't necessarily mean it's perfect or that it adheres to the classic code, the classic superhero code. It just means that whatever idea that you have, that's the one that's superimposed to the front. And the idea here is that the world is fractured, okay? That people are flawed beyond recognition. That gray area is just everywhere. There's no, you know, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever you have to do in that moment. That's the idealized world we have here. So in that idealized world, what is the adult theme?
What is the adult theme? I mean, we're dealing with more. We're dealing with sex. We're dealing with issues of morality. We're dealing with, you know, what's right, what's wrong. So I mean, you can definitely deal with some of those in a regular, let's say PG or PG-13 look. But here they're trying to up it, make it a little like, hey, this is not, it's not as simple as a black and white situation. This is a lot of gray, and sometimes you make choices which, even though they may be good, or actually turn out bad, or vice versa. You know, which are good, you know, actually bad choices, such as what you were saying before. Is there a way to do this without killing someone? And here they're dealing with some of that right now.
I'm going to help the writers out. If you want to show that superheroes should kill, or they should have the flexibility to kill, and you don't want to show it as a black and white thing, then you can't show it as a black and white thing. You can't consistently put the heroes in situations where killing is the only thing that makes sense to do. You can't make it seem that having a code looks idiotic. Okay, it can't be that I'm saying, well, you know what? We don't need streetlights, but you know, every other 5 seconds in the show, I'm going to show somebody getting hit by a car, which obviously shows, hey, we need the streetlights. You have to balance that out. You have to show situations where the code is effective. Then you have to show situations where the code isn't effective, and you have to come to a determination which one of these is going to weigh more, the times of it being effective or the times of it being ineffective. And then you can come to some synthesis, if you will, if you're talking about gray area as to this. They're not doing that. They're just saying, hey, look, this, they love to look at the past as if somehow the past was this halcyon time where everything was black and white, everything was just simple, it was good and bad. And you cannot tell me in a time like the Depression that was a black and white, that was a black and white period. Okay, they already showed stuff that was going on at that time. It was, you know, I don't see how it is that they look at the past and that was this pure time. You know, people weren't the same. You know, just go back 80 years ago and it was strictly a black and white thing. But then we get to the future. Oh, our time is so much more complicated and complex. No, that's just it's such egocentrism that's put in front of the audience, and then they can't live up to that egocentrism because you're putting the question there and you can't answer it.
It's not. I don't think it's a question that can necessarily be answered. You know, it's a question that people will struggle with. You know, I mean, like, for example, like I said before, the Joker and Batman. I mean, for the love of God, put an end to it. You know what I'm trying to say? You've put him back. He's escaped. He's killed people. At what point do you actually stop this guy and say, hey, this will no longer continue, right? Isn't that?
We know why. Joker's a great character. He sells. When they killed him he got killed the first time he came out. And what did they say? They said, why did you kill this dude? He was great, you know, and he's been around ever since. So they got to kill him. They're like, no, we want to see more of this guy. You know, we don't want to take away we don't want to take away storytelling opportunities with him. And we sure as heck do not want to take away the financial opportunities that we have with this character. The idea is that if you're going to pose a question and you don't have an answer to the question that you're posing, you're not asking this question of like you're in a college classroom and you're asking this of your professor because you need this information. You're posing this question, you know, rhetorically, and you have no idea how to answer it at the end of the day. And I understand that some writers want to go for that ambiguity because then they can just say whatever they want and they don't have to have an ending. So you have beginning, middle, with no end, and you can just scot off to whatever you want to do next. But with questions, especially with questions dealing with morality, you have to have an answer. Otherwise, you don't need to pose the question.
I mean, the question is whether the answer needs to be given in this episode, in this season, or whether this is a question that's going to go throughout.
Yes, I think yes, you need to answer it in this season. Yes,
I don't think that's.
You're gonna go 4 seasons.
I think
you're gonna go 4 seasons of people not knowing that they should kill people.
I think his whole comic series is a question on this. You know, so I don't think that the answer is not going to be in the first, because the answer is answered in the first one. Then hey, let's finish the season right now. It's done. We're not doing anything. And I think the same thing happens with the boys. You know, when you have ultimate power. When you have ultimate power, what can you do? But here you see, at least in
Miller, do whatever you want. No, if you have ultimate power.
But here, where you see in Millar's world, you know, and I'm talking about the heroes, is that, you know, there's always it's the chicken and the egg thing. People always say because they're superheroes, or some people say because they're superheroes, they're supervillains, and because they're supervillains, the heroes have to get the supervillains then have to get up their power game. So therefore, the superheroes have to up their power game. And here you have this happening. This tit for tat where they keep upping their game to get to what point where at the final end there's nothing left, you know, because everybody's trying to get one up on each other, you know, like who started it first, what happened first. Of course, you start one thing, someone's going to try to do something else to better the other, and I think that's That's one thing that they're talking about here. But I don't think this question is going to be answered now. This question is going to be answered throughout the series. You know, why?
If you can't answer it now, you can't answer it later.
No, if you answer it now, this goes.
You can't go
Must
4
just go there.
seasons. You can't go 4 seasons or even 2 seasons, let alone the one that they went here. And the prominent question you were asking is about life and death, and you don't have an answer?
No, I think what happens here, you have people are choosing, and I think they're going to have to learn to choose what's better. And some of them are going to have to learn that, hey, it's better to do it this way as time goes on. But I think this is a process that's going to go through it, particularly like the main character, one of the main characters, Chloe. She's the daughter of Utopian and I believe Lady Liberty. And she's also the sister of Paragon. Paragon, of course, wants to follow in his father's footsteps, but his father's pretty while Utopian is an idealized version, he sticks to the code. He's very rigid on that. He's very critical of his kids on what they do, how they reflect on him, how they reflect on the Union, which is the Justice League. We have at the same time Chloe's rebel and says, "Screw all this! I'm going to do my own thing," and she basically does. She lives her life the way she wants, which is contrary to many of the ideals that her father espouses, and doesn't want to be part of the Union. Doesn't want to utilize her power for good. And I'm not saying that she wants to use it for bad. Well, that's a whole nother issue we can look into later. But she's different in terms of that. I mean, looking at some of these characters now too, I think that, if it sort of reminds me of The Boys. And like you said, this stuff came out a little while before this came after The Boys. And I'm like, wow, of all the things they were going to do with Mark Millar as well, they chose the Jupiter's Legacy. And I mean, do you have anything about the comic books you can say about that, on how they sold or anything since the series started?
Well, Jupiter's Legacy is actually Millar's longest series, I think, overall, with everything he's done. And if you went and you said, "Oh, it's 10 issues, that's long," and yeah, in comparison to the other stuff he's done, and it's had a couple of sequels coming out of it. But the bigger difference between, say, this and something like The Boys is you have a character like the Utopian on this show, which, again, represents, that iconic superhero, as opposed to the other guys. I mean, there's him, and then there's pretty much everybody else. Everybody else is, he's the superhero, whereas everybody else is the superhuman, and they have no idea what the hell to do. And he's like literally the last bastion of any type of leadership. Even if you watch the show, he's the only person who never gives up. He's like, "No, we got to get to this place. I know when we get here, everything is going to work out." And everybody's fighting with him every single step of the way. But he's the foundation of what's supposed to go through. Same thing with like Superman at the end of the day. But The Boys, all the heroes are jacked up. All of them. They're all compromised. They're all flawed. They're all wrecked. So that series right there has already answered its question. No problem. Here, you've got one and you've got the other, even though you have a lot more of the other than you do of that one. And it's presented to us. I mean, again, a lot of the stuff doesn't. I mean, if you on its face, it may be okay. With a little bit of thought, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, Chloe is just a confused young woman. She can't even have sex with her clothes off. So she's just a confused. Every scene I saw, that was like, man, these guys are terrible. Okay, look, get a little skin on skin contact. Trust me, you'll enjoy yourselves. But in all seriousness, she's literally, she gets a bag filled with something, doesn't know what it is, and starts snorting it. Like, you're just a really confused young woman at the end of the day. But there's no reasons behind it. They're trying to do the whole classic thing of, "Oh, well, she didn't get the parenting she needed, so she just became wayward, this, what, and the other." Like, no, you had something that most people don't have, and you decided to squander it. You made that choice, not your parents. You made that choice. There's no responsibility for what you're doing at the end of the day. So they had something here. I mean, in terms of the series, I mean, in terms of the, if you read it, this is, for lack of a better term, this is the rote thing that they do with superheroes. They don't tell superhero stories anymore when they do this type of stuff. This is about superhumans. And these are always the idealized superhuman, that a human being is a flawed and messed up individual, that if you give them power, it will corrupt them worse than anything else, that they always go bad, always, and that they're always compromised somehow. They don't know how to make good decisions. That's always the case with these stories. They haven't done anything opposite, where you have somebody who's a flawed individual, they get these powers and they say, no, I can be better. They don't do that. Okay, it's always the opposite. They believe this is what the audience wants. Nobody's decided, hey, what if I told a story about someone who's just a really messed up individual, and then I give them all the power in the world. And when they get that, they realize, you know what? I've been wasting a lot of this stuff that I have. I can do a lot better than what I'm doing at this point. And I'm going to have a code to make certain that I stay on path, because I know what it's like. Even in those tough times, I've got to adhere to this, because if I don't adhere to this, then I'm excusing anytime somebody else does it. And I have a higher standard to adhere to. And yeah, that can be a real struggle. It can look hypocritical. It can look foolish. But if you believe that what you're doing is right, you have to keep doing it, because otherwise it wasn't worthwhile to begin with. But they're not examining that. We're getting what we get right over here. The tried and true.
The tried and true. Just to go back to what you were saying about the boys, there is a character who tries at the beginning to be as good as
Starlight.
Yes.
Oh please, she got on her knees in the first episode.
Right, but she was used. She was used. So I'm saying the point is she was used. So
come on, man. Don't make excuses for the character. She had a choice. She could have said no. She could have walked away, but she wanted to be a part of that team so much, she got on her knees. And then it became, oh, it wasn't your fault. It was this guy's fault because he had power over you. He used his powers to magically keep you in one place, okay, and perform on him. And then, it's all, look what he did to you. No. In that case, she could have been a hero, for at least for herself, and said, no, I'm going to step away. Okay, I'm not going to do this. This is not what I thought it was going to be. I don't want to be a part of this. Is this what I have to do? No, she was like, hey, it's okay. Just a couple minutes of my life.
We also have Nick of Time doing something similar. Well, not the exact same thing, where he's sleeping with Chloe, and trying to get a word in edgewise with her family so that she could get into the union, because he has powers and he's this is a way to get in, even though he's been denied the first time. So crazy stuff. So I mean, overall, what was your take on the characters here in the show? Either utopian, any particular character that stood out? Let's put it that way. For me, my favorite character to be Hutch. The fact that the guy who does not have any powers other than that stick was able to accomplish as much as he was able to accomplish until the very end.
He's the DC character Starman, where with the cosmic rod, that was like such a dead giveaway. Mm-hmm. But for me, the only character that I was interested in was the Utopian. That was the only character I was interested in, because all the other ones, I can predict exactly what they're going to do. Actually, I can predict it's probably going to happen to the Utopian as well, but he was the only one that I wanted to see, because his story is literally, they're marrying it to American optimism, the American dream, the American ideal. And the examination of the American ideal is somehow, it was always better in the past. It was always better in the past. We were more optimistic. We were more this. We were more that. And then you go to the past, but everybody's saying, "Oh, all the past was all jacked up. Look at all this. Look at all this racism. Look at this slavery. Look at this sexism." So you have two competing narratives, and nobody's being upfront about them. But I would love to see how this character, who possesses so much optimism and still seems to have a healthy amount of it in spite of everything else going around him, because he is going to adhere to that code that he put himself to. So he still believes in it, as much as everything else may be in a shambles to a certain extent around him. So I was interested in that, and I wanted to see how that would resolve itself. But didn't, at the end of the day, they did the classic, well, my brother's going to betray me. So, we know what's going to happen there. We see his brother primed to betray him, and his son is not ready to take over. So we already know what's going to. If you've read Hamlet, we know what's going to happen.
So you're basically saying. So I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because Walt is a character that we need to explore. Basically, he's a brother naturally, and he's somebody that we see in the story. At the very beginning, we get that, oh, he's the brother who's backing everything, but who's supporting the family. He's good with the kids and stuff like that. But as we start looking into the story, we start looking back into the past. We see that he's at loggerheads with the Utopian, and what the Utopian sees and believes. This is like, especially after his father dies in the crash, after the crash in 1929, the Great Depression. when the stock market crashed. And yet, you see him at loggerheads, but his brother, the utopian, takes the lead. His brother, the utopian, shapes the code. But as we go through the series, we start seeing that Walt is actually a lot more, is a lot more in the. Sorry, I'm just distracted there. But he's a lot more. He's turning out to be the bad guy. Let's call it what it is. You know what I'm trying to say? So
we didn't see that coming.
You saw that coming, huh?
Well, yeah, you saw that coming.
Well, you saw that coming, but he's basically been this loyal number two for what, 80 years? I mean, that's another thing too. The length of their lives. I mean, we're talking about from 1929 till now.
Walt is telling you he's going to betray his brother. Okay, he says it so early on when you have this friction. When you have the one brother who the father, when he tells him, hey, dad always wore this ugly tie and he hated this tie, but he always wore it because you gave it to him. I'm over here every day doing this type of stuff, but it's more important that this guy make you happy with this ugly tie, okay, than everything else that I'm doing. The moment that you have a situation like that, where you have the two brothers and one is being treated better than the other, or at least feels that way, they play this out and they play this out on television. They play this out in literature the same way. It's as old as Cain and Abel. It's as old as Jacob and Esau. So you know what's going to happen.
80 years they were together. 80 years. I mean, but it's also
for 80 years.
It's a long time. I mean, one thing to break, but I guess that's also where you have the Sky Fox, George Hutchinson, because they do his story, and in his story we find out that he is the father of Hutch, and he's given Hutch the rod. That since he doesn't have powers, the rod is what he's able to utilize in order to protect himself and to do things that he needs to do. And we see that Hutch is trying to bring his father back because his father's disappeared. But it seems as though Walt was behind that whole thing, what was going on with his father. And it's pretty interesting too. Walt's the guy behind the clones of Black Star. He's the guy who's trying to get Black Star. So you're like, wow, there's a bit of stuff that's coming on here with Walt. All this stuff in the end to do what?
To do what? Yeah. To depose his brother so he can take over the Union. Assume in that last episode, remember what he's joking about? Why were they given all these powers? So we can take over the world. Yes. I think it's very clear what he's looking to do. He wants to take over the world. Yeah. Pinky in the Brain made it very clear.
Hey, stop knocking Pinky, okay? Pinky in the Brain. So look, you're right. I mean, he says, I think in the second episode, where he basically says, things are changing. Paraphrase, I think it's second or first, where things are changing, and the supervillains are changing. We have to change basically with it. And you see that Lady Liberty also kind of agrees with it. When with the death of those young kids by the Black Star clone, Black Star being the bad guy in Supermax who they keep capturing and putting back in jail, and who Walt eventually helps to free, which causes quite a bit of havoc. But why hadn't he done it earlier? And that to me is the biggest thing after so much time. Why hasn't he done it earlier? But I mean, that's it, baby. I mean, other than that, any other characters that you're interested in who you thought were pretty interesting?
No, it was just a whack series.
Okay, so I mean, so you're not, if we're breaking this down, you're not basically recommending that we continue with this, and you're not telling people to watch this, or are you saying, hey, watch it but have reservations? Because I'm saying go watch it. I thought it was very enjoyable. I thought it was very interesting. I think it continues this line of shows. If you're liking The Boys, this is something that you will like too.
There was stuff that I found interesting for myself, but as a recommendation for other people, like, no, in good conscience, I can't tell you to go waste your time and watch this for 8 hours.
Hey, we got Mr. PD himself coming up. Yo, PD, what's rocking, baby?
What up?
So I'm glad you're on, because we've been at loggerheads with Cal regarding his views on Jupiter's Legacy, which we may have to eventually cut out a video. So
you already been talking about it?
Yeah, we've been talking about it, but we would love your view of it. What is your take on the show itself?
Yeah, PD, come and get some.
Okay. Ultimately, I'm thinking that since I didn't read the comic book, that it somehow what follows what the comic book is, and it's in the vein of, obviously it's Mark Millar, and he's kind of following the lead of the people that came before him, which are Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, and he kind of took the baton and went with it. But there's things that that both Alan Moore and Grant Morrison has some issues as far as their storytelling is kind of bringing that British sort of feel, or the British reaction to superheroes, because this spending all this time talking about the code and not killing, and this fact of these guys kind of getting their head kicked in not to kill, when it's just like, once people start dying, it's kind of bad. And then sort of the goth girl and these young heroes that can't sort of cut the mustard. There's this thing that they're kind of bogging themselves down in all this boring stuff to say that. And any talk of superheroes not killing is just sort of a thing that's an outgrowth of the 40s, of parents saying that Superman, Batman, and Mickey Mouse shouldn't kill. So this spending any of your time talking about it and spending all this stuff is just the reaction to this stuff. So it's like they're kind of being cynical about superheroes, that, hey, if we didn't kill, you guys, if we get killed while, we had to take them to jail while we're gonna get killed. Well, they had the nuclear guy and he's about to kill he's about to kill Utopian, and it's just like, and the sun saves the day, and he's like, wait, no, there's something, no, nobody cares. Fans are not into worrying about the cannon fodder. They're worried about the heroes. So this sort of thing, they kind of wasted too much time in this sort of millennial type of reaction, where the father has some critique about the daughter's, how much clothes she had on, and the whole thing goes awry. And it's like always spending time trying to find the father as an issue. Some of the past stuff, kind of this sort of wide-eyed thing of the real character in the right before the Depression, that sort of was it was interesting, but at the same time it was a little too wide-eyed, and especially the father kind of using the pension just to keep the wide-eyed son happy was kind of a little too much, and it was kind of being cynical about the whole American thing. So it's just why I brought up Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, is like this kind of cynical approach to these things that happen, the companies and that sort of thing. So it's kind of using all the American ideals, but it's kind of warping them, saying, oh, this sort of happened, so we're going to lead this to your hero and your villain and all this stuff. I would say it's interesting, but they spend too much time worrying about the heroes having a code and honor and all this other stuff, when it's like, the 40s, Batman's villains were falling to their death before Batman could save them. So they were still dying. The same with some of Superman's villains, where Superman was saying in the 40s, where he said, I couldn't, had this person not created this death trap with this acid, I couldn't, there's nothing I could do to save him at the same time, So it's like that, it's an outgrowth of that, whereas you're trying to say that I didn't do it, but this person kind of fell to his death. So they kind of
waited themselves. They did it to themselves. If you had been a good guy, you wouldn't be dead now.
Yeah, so it's like they wasted a little much time for that. And I would have a complaint, is that like the complaint of the costumes, like put some trunks on these guys or something, put the athletic, the boxer athletic, put something on these guys, because it's just like, I don't want to. It's like,
you had us there until you started talking about the trunks. I mean, this is a battle I was having with Cal about the whole code and the reason for the series and what is going to go through the whole series. Not something that's going to be answered in just this one series. It's just in this one particular episode. But
the irony of this is that if you play back everything I said before PD joins, it's pretty much the same stuff.
I'm just
same
saying, points. I'm saying
same points.
Again, that different emphasis. But I'm going to go back to the point that it's important. About this.
But not to kill.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they need to get off of it and just do. They got to do whatever it is to survive. You know, when you're in a when there's a machine gun fight and you're using a knife, it's not going to help. You got to come back out with your own machine gun, especially when the supervillains are coming after you. You know, or trying to destroy society. Your goal is to help society, to keep society from going down the dark, down that slippery slope, and that's what the heroes in the Union are doing, and that's what Walt's going to end up trying to do too. You know, in the very end. So I'm not liking Walt because he's on both sides of the fence. By the way, just want to know that.
I didn't mind. The only thing I didn't mind with that was the cop coming, but it's kind of pushing this thing of, hey, go out. I don't understand the cops saying it. I just kind of wasn't with them spending all this time with this claptrap about, you know, not killing in the code and all this other stuff. It's like, yes, but the ultimate thing, we should be reading a comic where Superman or the Fantastic Four, they're not actively trying to kill the villain, but they're doing everything it is to win. We're supposed to look at the comic book and say, oh, this guy, the villain is trying to do this. And the difference is that, oh, if the hero killed, then it would all be over. And that's kind of thing that you're kind of going against the convention. You're supposed to feel like whatever they're doing is the best they could do to stop the villains, or else like the X-Men versus the Imperial Guard. When they lose the Imperial Guard, they say, well, would we change this and say the X-Men try to kill? Well, Wolverine tries to kill, and it's like, well, no, he still lost. You know, like that sort of thing. It's like you can't just say we add one element of adding the killing element. I think a killing element to the story changes the whole arc. Where it's like, then it's like, well, what am I reading this for? If these guys are just holding back and they're just like the thing that people kind of say with Spider-Man all the time, it's like, oh, he's holding back. If he didn't, then what am I reading it for? I'm supposed to feel like this guy is this nice guy that just is too dumb to fight these guys and do the, you know, like when the was it, I forget, the kid was about to become the new Utopian. Like he's fighting that
Paragon.
He's fighting the girl with the cool, like this girl has a cool helmet and cool power that she's doing, and we're supposed to believe that he's only losing because he won't kill her. And it's just like, well, then you know, he should be learning from it, but then spending all this time talking about it, and it's just a waste of time. As far as it could be very, I mean, costuming, they could get it better, but it could have been better instead of wasting this time. Just get to the story, because there's some interesting.
Good line though. Like she said, you don't want on Instagram with you getting your butt whooped by me, right? I said that was a good line though. You don't want none of this, baby, right?
Well, that telegraphs what's going to happen, where it's like, well, why is he just going to run right into her and he's not going to try to assess the issue? Where it's like going to be like, well, wait a second, this girl took out these first people. Let me kind of assess the situation. It's different for Utopia when he comes and he kind of takes her out.
He's a big dog.
He talks about he had to, nobody talks about having to pay after the supervillain, stopping the supervillain, they got to pay for the damage done on the place when the person runs into it. Like that is what it is. It's only when you're making these jokes. So it's like the Alan Moore thing of like what Mad Magazine would do, kind of, but without the joke in it. Like that's the kind of thing that I kind of dislike, which is an easy thing to do, to kind of be cynical. You can do realistic superheroes, but to a point. Like Stan Lee and Jack did it up to a point. And that's where I think these guys are just like, oh, these, you know, Superman, when he gets old and he has to hand it off and trying to teach the young goth kids what to do, his idea of not killing is just not going to go into it. And it's just like, hey, it's all right for, you know, the Human Torch to grab, you know, Frankie Ray and say, hey, you can't just throw like flame around all the time. You could get like you see that Johnny Storm has to use restraint. He can't just go out there and just start, you know, Nova Flame. Like that's sort of restraint. Not
what damage control is for?
Huh?
Isn't that what damage control is for?
But that's a cynical, that's a comedy. It's not real. It's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to. When they do it, the end of the Fantastic Four 250, and the thing says, who's going to pay for all this? And the whole city block is done, or the same in the thing. You don't think about, want to see the next issue, seeing them go through go to the city paying off their bills and having to see all the paperwork and all that other boring stuff. So even going there all the time and doing damage control is like, I think Jim Shooter said that, hey, you know, the villain breaks through the wall, and then the next issue, the hole in the wall is this size, and the next issue is this size and this size. Like, no, the next issue is gone because nobody cares. So
the millennials seem to care. Who's paying for all this? Look at all this damage, and who's taking responsibility? You know, how is all this stuff? It's like, this is a fictional world. It's fictional. They can repair a wall literally in a panel. Like I forgot who I was talking to about it, but it was like the White Tiger was the first Puerto Rican superhero, and he was introduced in the pages of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And before that, you had the Sons of the Tiger. So the Sons of the Tiger each have an amulet. One looks like a tiger if you put it together, like a claw, or rather a paw in the head. Great. So they got into some falling out. And they decided we're not a team anymore. So they each take their pendants and they just discard them. They literally throw them out the window into the alley. Who happens to be walking in that alley but Hector Delgado, out of nowhere, sees the pendants, picks them up, and he becomes this new superhero, the White Tiger. That's comics. You just keep it moving. Just keep it rolling at the end of the day. It's like, okay, these guys don't want to do adventures anymore, but look what we got here. We got a brand new guy. He's got this really cool suit. He's ready to go. Are you ready to go? Because we're ready to go. Let's go with some action over here. But no, we got a whole bunch of fuddy-duddy prudes now where they're like, is that appropriate? That this person, these are the people who want to know why should Snow White have had the opportunity to consent to the prince, even though she's under a spell, okay? And she would be there forever.
Yes.
But we're not going into that madness. Are you serious?
No, but we do. We should go into that madness.
That is part of the mentality that permeates how people enjoy this stuff. When you're like, you are putting stuff in. I understand that some people, we want a little realism. Okay, you don't want them to be cardboard. You want them to have a little bit more flesh on the bones. I get all of that. But then you're trying to put, this is not the real world. Okay, this is not the real world. Well, it's going to take 7 years to rebuild stuff. You can do that in the next issue. You know, you have technology, science, whole bunch of stuff that you don't have to worry about. So a lot of the real world concerns can go out the door, and you can focus on, to be quite honest, a lot of the ideas that are supposed to be examined when we enjoy this stuff. But instead, we get bogged down with a whole bunch of malarkey, thinking that somehow, and I hate it because writers put across some of the laziest material, and people look at it and they spend a whole bunch of time pontificating to themselves and with their puff shirt friends are like, yeah, no, nothing's going on here. Nothing happened. So, the idea of focusing like piece on that hole in the wall, that's irrelevant. The damage, that type of stuff is irrelevant. You can fix all of that. Okay, it's what the superhero is supposed to be accomplishing and why they're looking to accomplish. That's always supposed to be paramount, as opposed to the minutia that these guys want to focus on.
Well, I mean that's exactly what I'm talking about. And one thing is that you have to remember is, why don't we always see after every day someone eating, seeing someone go to the bathroom, seeing how they pay their bills? Because we only see it if it's necessary to the story. And hearing them talk about this code, and that's the thing, Superman has a code, and whichever story we've heard it in, we know it's in like whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, but you can't keep going out. You'd have to do research to really find the exact issue where it's solidified. It's not an everyday thing of saying Superman's like 2 seconds from dying and saying, well, it'd be easier to just die than have to kill this guy. It's like, it's the waste of time, but it's something that these guys are making these. Now, this is like the difference between that's the ending of whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. This is the whole story. Like 2 episodes is about this code and how they react, and having to, you make a move, or you react too much, or you don't stop the villain in time and all this damage happens. It's all falls on the hero. And then they stop the villain, and then they got to go to a press conference where everyone's complaining. And it's just like, what happened? Huh?
They're not complaining negative. They're like, yo.
They had the signs. They're
like, vengeance. This is a good thing you finished him off. He's a bad guy.
They were kind of iffy on it. They were kind of iffy on it.
I don't know, the
But
irony
that's
is
why
that
Utopian jumped in and had to say, no, we have basically a code. Because he felt it was going too far where like they're congratulating his son and like we got rid of this guy and stuff like that. And he had to say, no, there's a code, and the code we go with and stuff like that.
And they were trashing him after that.
yeah. And the irony is that, see, this was written around 2013, 2014. And American politics stuff moves very quickly because now we're living in a moment, in a reality where people are saying we don't want to see police officers kill people. Okay, we want to see situations resolved despite whatever the situation may be. We want these people to be alive. We want to see them stand trial. We don't want to see police officers kill people unless this guy is coming out with like an AK-47. And even then, could you have stunned him? That's the moment that we're living in right now. And in the fictional world, they're still asking the question as to, well, should they kill people or not? You know, they're really much in the past with this. You know, you can't ask one thing and then the other one is like, well, that's a functional idea that we have to examine. So it just doesn't resonate any longer. You had that with Man of Steel when they wanted to have Superman kill Zod. You had a good almost 2-year argument about that amongst people within comics as to whether or not Superman was supposed to do this. And it was eventually put to bed that no, nobody wanted to see him do that. Okay, they didn't want it at the end of the day. It was so contentious, it bled over into the next film, it bled over into the comics. They continually examined it. And the bottom line they got to was, this just doesn't work. Nobody wants to see him kill anyone. You know, the most they may accept is what Petey was saying about, well, I wanted to save him, but because he made this death trap, you know, what could I do? There was, nothing I could do at the end of the day. So you've got to be able to answer this question. This is not something that's new. And to be honest, it is very, very cynical because you're putting them in these situations where you're saying, hey, you should have killed them. You should have killed them. Look, another one of you guys is dead.
At what point Walt says in the show, he says, I thought we should have done more, especially in World War II. He was talking about the concentration camps. You could have stopped this stuff much earlier, and what does, we would have gotten involved. Of course, Utopia basically is, it's a slippery slope, the more we do, the more we're asked, the more we do, the more control we have, right? He's saying, but, morally, who's responsible then? You have the power to stop the concentration camps. You have the power to stop the massacres in Rwanda. You have the power to stop, and yet you don't. You just, by not going in there and killing them and stopping them from doing those actions, you yourself are in a way complicit because you could have.
Mars, superhero characters are not real. They aren't real. And
no, they're not real.
You think they're not? You think they're real? Do you think that when Captain America, the Submariner, and the Human Torch went to war, because those characters, since they were Marvel, they kind of did stories like that. Do you think that they saved? You think, I know Submariner shrunk a bunch of Japanese ships in his comics, but do you think that Captain America didn't kill?
Of course he did. Of course he did.
So that's the thing. They were fighting in the war, and if you believe in superheroes, they were fighting in the same war that America was isolated in. And then when we go in there in, 1941, they were fighting at the same time. Because they're superheroes and we immediately go to Superman, then it should have been over as quickly as just Siegel and Schuster did it in the 2 pages they did. How they would handle they handled both. They handled
They scooped them up literally in panels, and it was over.
It was 2 pages.
It's such a, again, it's this look at the past that somehow, without any knowledge of it, at one point Hitler's attacking Britain, okay, and he's waylaying Britain, and he makes them an offer at one point. He says, look, I'll stop attacking you guys, okay? I'll even release a lot of, because they knew what was going on, with the concentration camps. He says, I'll even release the people I have in the concentration camps onto you guys, but I just want I want an agreement that you're not going to attack me while I go to attack Russia, okay? Which means at that point, you could have saved, how many people could you have saved from that, horrible situation in those concentration camps? And the response that the Allies gave, they said no, because they said, we can't afford to take care of these people. We know that as soon as you're done over here in Russia, you're going to consolidate your power and you're going to be back over here to attack us again. So the idea of In a real world situation, these guys had the opportunity to do something and they said, no, this isn't going to work long term for us. We got a war to fight. But we're going to go to superheroes and say, well, you guys could have done more. It's ridiculous.
So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Once you started saying that, you kind of play to this idea saying, what did Utopian do in there? Is it, he wasn't like, they're going to write around it saying that they went to Congress and Congress said, no, we're in isolation. So why wasn't it over? Oh no, we could only fight on the outskirts. So then the whole aspect of what they would do in Japan with the power, okay, you got to see, this is what it is. It's the quickest. And that's why because people were asking, people were cynically asking them what would happen. So they say, hey, this is why we don't do this, because it can be done in 2 pages.
Yeah. Oh, and
great art though.
Just for everybody's knowledge, I actually own this. I actually own the original book this was printed in.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah, Look Magazine number 43 with Rita Hayworth on the cover.
So that's the reason why you don't decide to try to go around it. Because that's the thing, what happens when you're a comic reader, you start asking, when you're at the tail end of it, you start asking, well, why didn't they stop this? And why didn't they, when this was happening, since they're real, what were they, or where were, I mean, then you get even further. It's like, in the Avengers, where were the Fantastic Four and the X-Men? It's like, do you understand that they're writing characters? They don't have money to do and even Stan Lee and Jack Kirby didn't have the Avengers show up in the first Galactus story, because it's called the Fantastic Four. You don't just immediately say we have every character meet every character, every story when there's a big global destruction. The way comics work, every comic book character is dealing with their own global destruction. That's the equivalent of what's going on in these wars. They're doing it in the comics. You want to see how the Avengers went to, the World War II or Korea? Go look at the Kree Skull War. They're doing the equivalent of this stuff. But people are like, no, we need to understand if they're real. No, that means those guys aren't even reading comic books. So those answers and those statements are just the cynical attitudes that people have, rather than just saying, just do your story. What's your story about? And the interesting part was this wacky villain, this Mongol or whatever he's supposed to be, he comes out and he's nuclear powered and he's like the Juggernaut.
Black Star.
Black Star. Come on, look at that design. Like it looks like a Superman villain. So it's like this character is just a basic Juggernaut type character, no brains, nothing. And the interesting part is after he dies, you see the real one come out saying, I've been locked up all this time. So then, of course, there's another thing that's mystery that we need to be getting to. So that was interesting. But then he has to ruin it and says, oh, you guys killed this character? I'm gonna, I got followers and all this other dumb stuff. It's like, there's no person on the planet that's gonna sit around there and cry for these villains that are trying to kill the hero or destroy everything. So I can't. I mean, the only thing I can also complain about some of the non, some of the hero, like the black girl with the weird hair. Like some of those things are made for superheroing, man. Like tie that hair down. The black girl. There's 2 black girls. One had the regular hair, and then one had like the braided sort of things like that. And it's like,
yeah,
yo,
well, that's weird. I mean, that's what they made out of.
Which one? I was gonna say which one? The one that got beat up or the one that got beat up?
The one who was going to fight Chloe, right? That's what you're talking about.
And well, and also the sister with that bad wig, that bad dark wig and whatnot.
That was a wig?
I mean, well, that's my wife was saying.
Yeah, that was a wig.
Yeah, I can't tell. I don't go to the beauty salon like you guys. I'm trying to say. So
you can't tell what a wig looks like.
Hey,
you've been fooled a lot of times, haven't you?
All the time, bro. All the time.
I believe you.
You wake up one morning like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
So
Wig.
overall, Pete,
Hopefully,
did you like
hopefully it was
series?
just the wig.
Pete, did you like the series, or do you recommend the series?
Actually, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend the series. It's I mean, the way it played out, it was kind of similar to, well, I think, what was it? It was this thing called like, it's called Danger Unlimited, but then I think Supreme, kind of the series that everyone remembers, where they went back and forth from the past to the future. So it's kind of more, if you're something that's in the know, it's more like Supreme, going from the past to
Comic book.
the future, that sort of thing. But so that could be considered interesting, but at the same time, it's when they just got bogged down on trying to show these characters look old and having these bruises and that sort of stuff, when it's like, I mean, outside of your arm getting broken or something like that, even, you can play that out for a little while, but at some point that even gets tired. So I can't necessarily recommend it, but we'll keep, if the fans are there, we'll keep reviewing or give you an overview of the entire series.
If you really want it.
I'm trying to understand why Supreme.
Huh?
I said, I'm trying to understand why Supreme.
I said Supreme was just something that goes from the past, from the future, then to the past, that sort of thing. And the same, the Danger Limit did it beforehand, but that was only like 4 issues. Supreme, I think that was published about 13 issues, and everyone kind of remembers Supreme. So I just mentioned those two as a sort of format. Yeah. So even though they only have those 3 names, they also had Rick Weich doing some of the, or Jim Mooney, doing some of the past stories. So.
Got it. So overall, it's a pass for you. It's a no.
It's a bail. Jump out the plane. Grab the parachute and leap out of the plane. Or if you don't have a parachute, just still leap out of the plane. Jump.
One issue that Cal and I were talking at the very beginning is that the similarities of these shows, like Invincible and Boys, and they're all coming out roughly at this time. And what's your take on that?
That was the hardest part for me, because when I was reading, just to mention Invincible for 2 seconds. I was reading Invincible, and they had like the Global Guardian, whatever those, the Guardians of the Universe, and I was just like, another Youngblood, another group of superheroes in the Image universe. Okay, we know what happened to them. So when we had this story and him doing, well, I mean, it's just tough for me that he's doing this thing, because when he initially did his Millar World, there were some wacky heroes. There was Wanted, there was the Unfunnies, and there was a couple other things, but they were a little bit off the side. When he did his next push for Millar World, he was like, I'm not making that mistake again. I'm doing pastiche of every DC character that I possibly can. I'm going to do multiple Supermans in multiple versions, multiple Batmans. Like, he said, you guys think the Rock, like the whole approach to Hit Girl is what they ultimately use for Damian as far as Robin the Boy Wonder. Like, you have Robin never worked as far as when people got cynical, until Robin became a killer assassin. And that's what Hit Girl kind of brought. So this approach to comics, the cynical approach to like kind of doing these dark sort of things in the Millar World, even though there's one that I think one of the sci-fi ones is a little more fun to it. But these sort of pastiches, I can't, like the fact that Netflix they put their money behind something that people can catch on to. But even The Boys has The Boys still has the superhero, the Justice League type of thing, Super Friends. So I can't even try to say it's a little different because they're hunting them. It's still too much. It's like the mirroring stories. The Boys have the heroes that have gone too far bad, and this has the heroes that are too good for their own good. So that approach I can't get with. You can start there, but at least try to come up with some different stuff. Not here's Superman, here's Wonder Woman, and the Batman, or that's things. Oh gosh, like the Flying Fox. There's already like character that was at Marvel, which was the Black Fox. but he was a little bit different, but he was more of a pulp character. So they had a pulp look for him initially, and then he donned sort of the Batman thing. But the fox head is the same one in the first line in Marvel's 50s character event, the character superheroes, but they were all really pulp type heroes. So it's, I mean, I'm going on too long about it, but it's kind of sad that they would just sort of cop out and kind of do the Super Friends again and again and again every time. It's just saddening for these guys that are the top creators. He's the top. He was the top guy, and he's just gonna. He worked on those. What's those guys? The not the Ultimates. The Authority. He did the Authority. So this is like he had already. It's like the same sort of thing, but just flipping the coin. Here's the darkest side. Here's the scarred coin of these Super Friends. So.
I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask Cal a question before we run it out. We don't have much time left. One is why the Justice League? Why is that the standard that everybody uses that they bring up stories about, as opposed to, say, the Avengers? Cal.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
I said, why is it everybody's bringing up these shows based on the Justice League as opposed to the Avengers? Why are they using?
Because the Avengers is based on the Justice League. All of that you have that influence that you have from the Olympians, and it filters down into the Knights of the Round Table. That filters down into more of these. This perfect union of all of these people who come together and become this gestalt that's greater than the sum of its parts. And they're supposed to be these paragons, these examples, these pinnacles that show, look, this is how it's supposed to be done. And each aspect, if you look back at the Olympians, this was like the pinnacle for the heavens, the pinnacle for the earth, the pinnacle for the seas, all of that type of mastery when it came down to it. And it filters down into the comics as well. The Avengers was the Avengers is slightly different because those guys were sometimes a little bit too Olympian, but they're always bickering with each other, and they seem to be their own worst enemy until finally a villain pops up, and they're like, "Oh, let's beat him up instead of each other." But those are that's the highest example. I think it would be really difficult because we've been modeling that example, since Greek mythology. So nobody's really decided, well, look, I'm going to put a team together and it's going to highlight these human ideals, which is what the Olympians actually did. In terms of Greek myth, everybody's trying to highlight those human ideals. Well, that's the model for Western civilization, at the least, that everybody's followed, and they're not trying to reinvent the wheel.
What about you, Peter? You agree with that, or you have a different?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I would only say that when you look at the Avengers, their round table was basically just a table. It wasn't really that heavy duty, it was just like, here's a mansion. Obviously, there might be some living quarters, but it was very just basic function. It isn't until later so they added some more technology when they needed to. So ultimately, the whole sort of almost Greek pantheon type of thing you've seen in more so when they had the Hall of Justice and the Super Friends, and then it trickled down, because in the comic books they more had the satellite. In the comic books they had the satellite that they would operate from. And in the Super Friends, they had the Hall of Justice, and they had some cool setup where you come in and how big these heroes are. So let's not throw out, we can't, obviously the comics, Marvel definitely borrowed from that Justice League, but that's the thing, you can borrow from that, but they went differently. They found with different notes to make and that sort of thing, rather than doing what we think the Justice League was, that they spent all their time talking about Batman, don't kill, Green Lantern, don't kill. I mean, to some extent, they, you can do a compelling story where, by mistake, Green Arrow, kills someone and he goes off and he kind of becomes a monk because of that. But at the same time, there's only one story. It wasn't something that was going to hold on the rest of his life. And that's what can't be held on these sort of characters. And you don't want to spend time worrying about did they kill people. So yeah, I mean, yes, this you can copy that. You can copy the Justice League but you can't, you shouldn't, you should try to find your own sort of way to go. Whereas the Fantastic Four copied the format of the comic books, but at the same time, of them sort of having a call to action type of thing, but they didn't do that. They had a monster, they had, there's no one clear, in the early stories, they kind of all, I think Neil Adams said they all kind of had the same personality, and you can see that, Stan and Jack kind of went differently, these guys bickering and that sort of thing. And Avengers being a little different, where they kind of switched, they switched their leadership all the time, where it was like, okay, it's your turn. Where we think now Captain America was always, but kind of Thor was the guy, and then they kind of switch it until, it's not until Cap gets his own team and it becomes that later. So yeah, I mean, I definitely, going back, I definitely agree with what Cal was saying, and I almost think that they should stop, and try to come up with something different. And then as you come up with these different characters, you can find different ways of interaction with these things that you want to do, like these darker heroes or that sort of thing. But doing the heroes being lame because they don't kill, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
All
It's
right, so,
also one last thing I'll point out is that the killing, no killing was like the greatest check on a character, say like Superman, who could pretty much kill any character. He could come over, and if he didn't really want to be bothered with it, he could take care of it in a couple of panels, similar how he takes care of Hitler and Stalin in those stories. But what came out of that was that you had a lot more creativity, because they had to stop these threats. And they had to protect the people. In some cases, they had to protect the people. Let's get them away from this so we don't destroy any property. And then I got to stop this guy, and I got to stop this guy with a reverence that, they should still be alive by the time that I'm all done with it. And that led to these guys, when you're looking at them, they become like Paragon on top of Paragon, because they're able to execute this stuff and make it look easy. So when you had the new cats coming in, they're like, how do you guys do this? How do you come over here and shut down this situation and nobody's dead? Okay, there's not all this excessive property damage. The villain may be like, sour about the whole thing, but they're gonna go stand trial, and you keep doing this so you show that the system that's in place is viable and works. That was something that they had also explored in the comics, because these guys, they put them through the ringer in terms of all of these different situations. And regardless of how many no-win situations they were put in, Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman would always find a way out. And then they would like, ha, 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 we got you. They would be carted off by the police. Didn't matter. So they, the amount of creativity and imagination that was put towards that made it, that type of question moot. And then when they came back with it, it was like, we're going to put you in this box over here that you can't get out of, without doing this, and then call it a question. Doesn't really sell at the end of the day. So
guys, I don't mean to cut you, Cal, but this is we're running out of time. So I just want to just sum up. Hey,
this is censorship.
Hey, censorship. So hey, we all enjoy the show, and we just want to say, hey, if you're interested, go out and watch it. Spinner Rack.
I got one last bit.
We don't have time. We don't have time. We don't have time. We can add it in a minute.
Just last bit.
We can add it. Spinner Rack. Wait.
Saying less than a minute. Less than a minute.